So what you got for us today?
Yeah, so I want to look at how to get to the point in your relationship where you can feel together. Um, we'll talk about why that's important. And again, in the spirit of like skills you can start using today, day one in your recovery. So this is probably, although couples may not complain about it in this way, I think this is behind like 100% of the complaints I hear from couples in recovery is we are not handling feelings in our relationship. And why this is important is because I think you have to feel together as a couple because that's like what relationships are made of is feelings. Um, the idea that like you can fix a relationship by getting logical or doing what makes sense, like that's just not how human beings work with stuff that's high stakes like this. So feelings are what relationships are made of, and so neglecting that or not doing well at that means that you aren't going to be satisfied in your relationship. So let's start with looking at some common mishandlings of feelings as they come up. Um, one that I see a lot is can fall into the category of defensiveness, but it's prizing logic over emotions.
Ooh,
Most of us, if you're from a Western culture, you live in a culture that prioritizes or elevates logic over emotion. Um, that's just not, how do I say it? That's not real. That's not true. Logic is not better than emotion. Emotion is not better than logic. Like it takes both together. It's how our brains have developed. Both of those working together is how you get wisdom, how you get perspective, all of that kind of stuff. So if you have a belief system that says emotions are bad, emotions are low, there's a better way to do things than emotions, there's a place to start. Start informing yourself, start wondering where that belief system comes from. Really start taking a hard look at how well has that served me. Maybe personally you're doing fine in a world without emotions, but maybe your relationships struggle because you're trying to turn something, like I said, that is all emotion into something that's none of them. Um, Another common mishandling I see is defensiveness. And when you look at couples early on in recovery, let's think through some of the reasons why couples might be defensive when it comes to emotion. How much of the time for any of you, when your partner starts sharing feelings, do they say, this really has nothing to do with you. I'm just personally struggling about this thing that really isn't connected to you at all. Not only how often do they say that, how often is that actually true early in recovery? I would say early in recovery, post discovery, a lot of the emotions are about what's happening in the relationship, what's happening with finding out that there's been secrets. Um, so defensiveness, it makes sense as a response, although it's not helpful. Many of our instincts in relationships, if you want to just go on human instinct and try to have good relationships, you won't, because our instincts for relationships aren't good. You have to think through. You have to show up differently. So defensiveness can come up because there's an implication, either an implication of guilt or maybe there's criticism in that. All those things that are hard to handle, um, although in the big scheme of things, may ultimately be true. I'm feeling angry with you because you lie to me. I'm feeling angry with you because what I hear from you most every day is what a jerk I am and how I've ruined your life. Um, so defensiveness gets in the way of being able to connect feeling to feeling because oftentimes the way that feelings are expressed or the way that they're held are not inherently invitational. I'm feeling upset with you and I'd like you to sit down with me and could we talk through some of that? Or could I vent to you or could I share with you? And again, no flaw in the person who can't do that with their anger. Again, there's human instinct. I'm mad and here comes my emotion. Another common mishandling of feelings is how do I want to say this? Uh, Misunderstanding the whole nature of feeling. So oftentimes I'll see couples explain, well, I feel really bad, or I feel really sad that you said XYZ to me. Well, let me tell you what I meant. And it's almost this like, well, if I can explain it differently, does that feel any better? And that's not what emotions are. And the reason why we might have an emotion that we want our partner's help with is not that like, oh, I think I misunderstood this. It's no, I either something was said or done, or I perceive something said or done that really hurts. It's really upsetting to me. So an explanation or a trying to explain away or a let me tell you what my intentions are. Um, that is like mistaking grease for water or oil
Mm.
for water when there's a fire. Well, they're both liquidy. They both kind of look the same. What happens if I throw oil on a raging fire? Like you inflame it because the fundamental nature is being misunderstood. Emotions are best handled emotion to emotion, right brain to right brain. And that looks very, very different than often what our instinct is. Um, Most of us, especially when it comes to negative or intense emotions, our instinct is to distance, especially if it's a negative or intense emotion that we weren't expecting. Um, I have often found that my second or third draft in response to a big negative or overwhelming emotion is much better than my first response. A lot of times my first response is shut it down, manage it, put some parameters around it. An example of this a couple of years ago. I don't remember exactly what I was doing, but I was around one of my sons, and he'd gotten hurt, and he like walked right past me and went and found my wife in our house and asked for her help. And I noticed this. I bookmarked this. My wife came to me later and she said, I have to tell you what he said when I asked, why didn't you go to dad? Dad was right there. And he said, well, dad's just going to tell me what I did that got me hurt.
Oh,
And I was like, oh, he's right. That is my natural instinct, especially, something that is surprising and overwhelming. And, I automatically start thinking prevention, and that's what I lead with. And I've thought about that a lot over the years and have really tried to get a better response to that instinct. And instead of going to, okay, what happened and why did you make that mistake? Go to, where does it hurt? What can we do about it? I'm so sorry you're hurting. So you hear in that the difference between a left brain to right brain. Let's think this through. And, the best that can do is, maybe next time, if you can listen to me right now, maybe next time you won't get hurt in this way, which is ultimately, that's pretty useless in a situation where somebody has a lot of intense emotion going on. Versus the right brain to the right brain is, oh my goodness, I see a lot of pain. Oh my goodness, that really, really hurts. Um, another barrier to, or another common mishandling of feeling together um, would be the mishandling of guilt that comes up. So if your partner's hurting and you know that the reason why they're hurting is you may become more concerned with getting your guilt to go away than you are them. And just think about that, like evolutionarily, biologically, for a minute. Of course, what I'm feeling would be more salient to me than what you're feeling. My pain means more than your pain automatically because I'm the one feeling it. I'm not in your body. I don't know what that's like. Um, so I think it's important early on to be able to identify things like shame, embarrassment, guilt, and to be able to put a name on that because um, those things often cannot be dealt with immediately. And often I don't think that they are effectively dealt with immediately. Shame, guilt, embarrassment, all that kind of stuff. I think those are kind of like marinade type emotions. I have to come back to this again and again, understand it and help it dissipate. So early on, being able to understand how shame comes up for you can help a lot in being able to go right brain to right brain. The last thing that I'll talk about, common mishandling or what makes it hard to feel together is um, sometimes our inclination for how to express an emotion is not invitational, like I said before. So while it makes a lot of sense to me when I'm hurt or surprised or scared to swear up a storm, and it really does, like that makes a lot of sense to me. I've noticed for the people around me who I want to help, um, me packaging the emotion like that and then expecting someone to feel really comfortable and confident coming in close is not likely to happen. Um, to bring that to a recovery arena, let's say you're a partner who's just found out that your spouse has been cheating on you for a long, long time and been keeping secrets. You have every right in the world to call your spouse every name in the book. That makes sense. The reason why the anger might arise that way, why you might feel inclined to do that, like nothing's wrong with you for feeling that way. Um, Expressing anger in the form of an attack or expressing hurt in the form of an attack, name calling, um, verbal abuse, while it might feel cathartic for you, does not open the door for this, hey, come sit with me and help me with this. And I get for a lot of people who have been betrayed, that actually is what they want. It might even be what they're going for. What I really want is for you to come sit down. And that doesn't put all the responsibility on a partner who's been betrayed to clean up their emotions and, let me present it to you in a good way. And I'll give another example of this for like an addict, someone who's struggling with addiction. Um, we tend to be famous for like not handling frustration or anxiety, or any of that kind of negative emotion stuff real well. If my preferred method for handling anxiety is to move at 1,000 miles an hour and to get really critical and to start looking at like managing this or that or controlling this or that, what I really may be seeking for is like I just want somebody to come help me. Like I want somebody to notice. And there's clear distress signals there, just like yelling and screaming and swearing at somebody. There's clear distress signals there. But again, remember that your partner is not emotionally disconnected and they're not removed from the situation. They're actually right in it. And so early on in recovery, I think it helps couples a lot to do some personal work on how you feel and express the emotions that you have. And that often starts with, first of all, being able to accept, I'm angry and this is what it sounds like and feels like. I'm angry and this is what I want to do. And it's not that you're feeling wrong. It's not about getting to feel it right at all. It's about taking the next step. So I can feel this, I can connect with it authentically. And then if I want help with this, or I want someone to show up for me, I might need to think in terms of how I actually send up the distress signal, how I actually advertise I'm hurting and I'm open for your help. And on the other side of that, if you want to get better at holding your partner's feelings, you have to learn how to decode a little bit. So it's not a one side of the equation or the other. It's not just let me clean up my emotions so it makes it easier for you to come. And it's also not like I should just understand that that means that you're hurting and you want my help. It's really a team effort. We can start to decode. I was so proud of my 11-year-old this week. We had a run in. I was getting really frustrated with him. I didn't appreciate the attitude that he was giving and the criticism he was leveling, and I let him know. And then we disconnected for a minute, and he came back to me and he said, Dad, these situations, I want you to know these situations are tough for me because I'm worried about doing this wrong and you being angry with me. And he said, so that's where my energy is coming from. And like, I could have given that kid a gold medal. I was so proud of him in that moment for being able to put words to his feelings and come forward and let me know. Again, there's an invitation there. And there was also for me during that time that we had disconnected, I was working to reframe. I was working to think through like what could be going on for this kid. What is this about? Because I don't think he's just a mean kid. So when it comes to feeling together, how to get there, there are some things early on in recovery to address. Look at patterns of defensiveness. Look at what's your belief system around emotions in the first place? Do you have a belief system that allows for emotions to be? Do you have a belief system that values emotions? And hint, hint, if you don't, work on changing that, because you cannot get around the fact that emotions are a necessary, integral part of human experience. So if your belief system doesn't align with that, you need to change it. You're not in alignment with reality. Working on the way we intellectualize feelings. I just heard something right brain for you that really scares me, that overwhelms me. I want to go left with this. I want to skirt the feeling altogether. Work on some ability to feel along with somebody. Now I've got that feeling in my gut, my stomach is twisted in knots. That means I'm really anxious or I'm really scared. And that'll pass with some deep breaths. That's a sensation in my body I don't necessarily have to respond to. Sensation does not equal action. It doesn't have to. And a lot of the folks I work with, both addicts and their partners, whether or not they struggle with it historically, certainly in this moment, post-discovery, post-disclosure, they do struggle with that. And then last, like we just talked about, look at the way that you express your emotion. If you're wanting relational help with what you feel, look at how you package that. Is it invitational? Is it demanding? Is it threatening? If you want somebody's help with something, it's a really, really good idea to present it in a way that induces them to help you. And on the other side, if you're struggling with your partner's feelings or statements that feel like too much or too critical, learn how to decode a little bit. Learn how to step outside and depersonalize just a little bit. I know you just called me this foul name. That usually means you're hurting pretty bad. That usually means you're pretty upset. I'm going to listen to the feeling, not the words. And again, why this is important is because relationships are made of feelings, and relationships are made or broken on how we hold and respond to each other's feelings. So, why should we feel together? You already are. What your relationship is at. So my output to all of you today is put some effort into getting better at that, working on that. Your relationship is made of it, and you'll notice a pretty immediate reaction to instead of the intellectualizing or the defensiveness or the explaining away or whatever, when feeling is greeted with feeling, and that's invitational and it's warm and it's empathetic, those difficult feelings tend to move on easier, tend to move on quicker. They tend to resolve better. So that's the topic today.
Well, I'm wiping my eyes because I'm still so moved by your 11-year-old. So I'm like, wow, like this is what happens when good parenting happens, and how so many of us didn't have that, which, guess what? We end up, with lots of issues. You just clarified something for me though, because, when you say emotions with emotions, but then you said, it's like the softer emotions. Cause I was like, well, I can come right back at somebody with emotion, but like, it can be that, really what, like, you're calling me names. And I mean, like you can come with feeling and it can be intense, so what I hear you saying is, like you said, it's the decoding of like, okay, you're coming at me with a lot of anger and hurt, and I'm going to use my secret decoder that's going to say, oh, there's pain here. And rather than, I think it's always like, what do we want? If we want to be in a relationship and we want to heal this relationship, or do I want to dig in my heels and, is this the hill I want to die on? I want to be so defensive, and what does that really get me alone? Maybe I won, maybe, but did I really? So I love that you just clarified that, it's the emotions, but it's, it's the right emotion. I want to ask, because you said, you're coming at me with right brain and I want to go left. Are you saying you would say that out loud, or are you thinking that in the moment?
No, it's an internal thing to
Okay.
look for. If that's language that helps you and your partner, it takes time and it takes effort to pull yourself back from that left brain emotionally detached. So if that language helps, it can help your partner to hear like, I'm having my left brain reaction. I'm trying to move right. Give me a minute here, or I'm working on getting there. But mostly as a point of internal orientation, just check. Am I relying on my intellect? Am I relying on thoughts, rules, structure, logic? Or am I in a space where I can feel what's going on and trust myself to respond appropriately, to respond helpfully? Because that's again where feelings are. Is um, feelings are not a preset set of rules. You know, when somebody's sad, you do this. When somebody's upset, you do this. If you're really in that feeling to feeling place, it's like I can feel what kind of sad you are, and I know what's going to help. So I was mountain biking with I ride with my son's high school mountain bike team. We talked about this last time. Riding this week, and I was riding sweep, which means I was the last person in the line of high school students, and my job was just to make sure that everybody gets to the destination accounted for. So I'm riding behind this girl who she said it was her second year riding. You could tell her confidence isn't that high. We're on this really narrow single track
Mm.
trail, kind of high up on a mountain slope. And she keeps saying, she's like, I'm just so afraid of falling. And I said, I get it. You know, slow down, and you don't have to race to get there. And she's riding, and sure enough, her front wheel goes over the edge of the trail, and she tumbles down about halfway down this really steep, rocky slope. And you know, she's cut up and scraped and bruised and stunned. So I throw my bike down, and I jump about 5 feet to the side, and I jump down the mountainside too, just to get down there. And the other parent riders who were coming up later, they found us real soon, and I radioed for help. And um, this one parent rider, his reaction when he gets down there is, "We need a picture of your crash." And he pulls out his phone, and she was kind of this like, oh, okay. And she smiles, and I was thinking about that, and I was like, not sure how I feel about that reaction. Then another kid fell off the trail too later in the practice. It's a really dicey place to ride. And again, that was this guy's first response is, um, we need a picture of your crash. But I noticed he wasn't the first guy on the scene. He's looking at this, and like, it's a scary thing to fall down a mountain and be out of that, and be that out of control.
Hmm.
He also asked, like, can you move your arms? Can you move your legs? Anything feel broken? He checks there. um, that kind of hurt and sadness, I think, can respond well to a little bit of distraction, even a little bit of lightheartedness. As he was checking one kid over, he said, "That's going to be a cool scar." like, um, which again, if you know some mountain biking culture, like, there's kind of a badge to that. Like, there's that crash I had, and here's that gnarly scar. So when we're in a feeling place, we're not necessarily looking at a certain set of rules. We're intuitive in the moment. What kind of sadness is this? What kind of hurt is this? And often when we're feeling to feeling, the ideas that come up for us, they're really coming from that feeling place. They're generally pretty adaptive. They can be pretty good. The hard thing for addicts, especially, and their betrayed partners, is there's a real disconnect between our body feeling and our intuition and our intellect that wants to run the show. And that's what we do when things are really, really dangerous. Is it's harder and harder to stay right brain. It's harder and harder to stay in the feeling, and we want to get more managey about it. Um, so in outlining this today, any of these pointers I'm giving, I'm not saying they're easy. They really have to be worked on. Putting it on your radar early. Let me look for how I do defensiveness. Let me look for how control shows up for me. Let me look how I might get indulgent when I'm angry, or anxious or afraid.
And I was thinking, because you also said uh, that instincts for relationships are not good, and I was like that one caught me off guard because I was like, but we do better, in relationships. So it
Isn't it?
was just kind of like we do
It
it sucky.
isn't it a cruel design? If I look from the perspective of like what comes out of starting with an instinct that's not good up against a need that's necessary for us, what comes out of that? It's maximization of your body brain potential. So think about it this way: you have a frontal lobe that can do this, like, minimize punishment, maximize pleasure, avoid the worst part of things. You have these parts of your brain that feel and remember deeply, and the way that we're wired is they can talk to each other, and they do a little bit naturally, but everything in the brain, the more you use it, the stronger it gets.
Mhm.
So you look at what comes out of this recognition that my instincts for this are terrible, but I need it and I need it to be good, is you can learn, and you can put in place some things that initially won't feel maybe natural or won't feel intuitive, but over time, as you do it and it works, it becomes more of a go-to, and you evolve as a person. You reach. I believe that a big part of addiction recovery is tapping into like our whole human potential, and that's part of it. Is we have strong instincts and we have strong intellect, and those two things can actually work together and create something much better. We can change a whole environment. We can change a whole world by letting those two things come together.
Yeah, well, yeah, because it was one of those things where I was thinking, you know, if our instincts are bad, but I hear what you're saying, but we can learn. Like even in the example of like if I'm defensive, but the flip side of it is like if something goes well, like being a little examining on that of like, oh, that actually went well. I should use that tool more often than
Mhm.
my digging my heels in and being defensive, you know? So I think we absolutely, I know for sure, because I know lots of addicts in recovery, and we can learn to do things differently if we choose to.
Absolutely.
Okay, so the first question, 2.5 years after D-Day. I'm going to put this one in answer. Can you see it?
Yeah, I can see it.
Okay. 2.5 years after D-Day, husband weekly CSAT and with meetings a week has now says he can't handle talking about the past. Too much shame. He says he doesn't need to think about those things anymore. It's time to move on. If I check in any negative feelings or trigger, he shuts off completely now. Says he's tried everything to help me and I can't be helped. Ooh. Also, he made the comment that perhaps he's been coddling me for taking over a lot of responsibility. Asked me if we were poor, would I have pulled myself together and gotten a job already? What would you call this or make of this? After all, he stayed in the fire with me for a few months, so he is capable.
Yeah, the most generous take I can make of that, and I think it is important to make generous assumptions. Is he may have reached a capacity. And again, here's the reality about relationships. Sometimes the relationship that we need to be able to have and what's required to care for it is not what we're capable of doing. So, this idea of like the past is too painful for me to talk about. What that speaks to is there's not healing that has happened for the individual. There's parts of my past that I don't like to go there. It's not pleasant, but I can. And especially when it's necessary, like it's okay to touch that. It's okay to remember those feelings. This, like, I want to avoid the past. That's more of an orientation to feelings are overwhelming for me. And I want to live my life in a way that skirts around as many feelings as possible. Not because I'm bad, but because it's overwhelming. So there's some work cut out to do here. Um, it may not be a matter of do we go to the past or not, and it may be more of a matter of turning the spotlight. What's the kind of support you need when we go to the past? Clearly, that's not feeling good for you. And for the spouse who's writing this, I'm sorry, I'm not done with the past. I still have feelings there. There's things that are not resolved for me. There's things that aren't feeling good. And it's important to keep in mind that if feelings have evolved over decades or numbers of years, this isn't like a set in stone thing, but count on like double the amount of time to be able to really heal that and work that out. If you're going on just time alone, if you're putting skill on top of that, of course, the time reduces, but like unwinding the past and healing from the past takes a lot of time. And this is something for a lot of people who have betrayed through addiction or affairs or whatever. They have a hard time understanding. And I get it from a self-interest point of view. Like, this is really painful for me to be reliving, and I'm ready to be done with that. Um, but your partner's feelings are not on the same timetable as yours. Your partner is actually not equipped to be able to resolve this like you are. The secrets that you kept and the betrayal you did, you were in the cockpit the whole time. You saw it. You have the story. You have the context. Your partner has none of that. So it's way, way harder for them to be able to resolve. It's not impossible. It often takes more time, and it takes a different path than your own resolution does. So there's a lot of need for understanding and empathy here. And if the setup in the coupleship is like, you hurt me back then and I still hurt, so you're on the hook and it's time to be punished. If that's what your coupleship is doing and doing on purpose, like, don't do that. That's not great. It's not helpful. But that also doesn't have to be the feeling for why you go to pass. It's not a punishment. Could be an opportunity. Could you show up at this time and place with me? Could you show up with how this is intersecting and help me out here? And more often not with partners who have been betrayed, what I see in their need to go back and talk about the past, it's a cry for an attachment need to be met. I'm overwhelmed. I'm scared. I'm feeling alone. Could you show up at this time and place and be my partner? Hold my hand. Help me get through it.
And I was looking at this and I hear what he's doing, but I put some resources in the chat. We have a betrayed partner work group that starts again July 21st, and the Empowered Women's Retreat. And that's so healing, and it just really is. And we don't talk about him, like this is, the work to heal, the wounding that has happened for the women. So so consider those options. But like he's doing what he's doing, and I love what Jon suggested about, like, can you show up, like for this. But I would really invite you to get help and support for you, because other betrayed partners, we have betrayed partner drop-in groups. Those are places where people can share their hurt and frustrations and their wins, like the good stuff too. So in a neutral space. And but we also talk about self-care all the time. Debbie McCrae does uh, the Friday alternating webinars, and she often talks about when partners come in and they're dysregulated. She says, how is your self-care? And it's not, and so there are things you can do regardless of what he's doing or not doing that will help you. And I'm not saying what he's doing is okay. That shutting you down is, get over it. That never is a great option. But I'm, what we can do is take care of ourselves. So if there are things that would be helpful for you to, in this moment, regardless of what he's doing, that may help you regulate for your own self. So, okay, the next one. Can you talk about the link between enmeshment and feelings of entitlement? When his abandonment wound is activated, my enmeshed PA partner still struggles to respect my boundaries and doesn't seem to understand that continuing our relationship is a choice. There are times when he seems to be thinking and acting from a much younger age and approaches me with resentment and anger. During those times, I wonder if he's not seeing an adult partner with her own feelings, desires, and needs, but rather an alcoholic mother who was inconsistently attuned and often harsh and critical.
So this is something that's getting more and more clarified for Dr. Adams and I. The focus on enmeshment recovery is not on the enmeshment, is how I hear a lot of people talk about it. So in other words, long-term recovery from enmeshment is not, it's not a boundary plan with your parent or your family or even your spouse. And it doesn't even start with a boundary plan. So what it starts with is increasing your awareness or turning your attention to who am I? What are my needs? What's going on for me? And so what I'll see a lot in moments like this is actually describing right here what the heart of enmeshment recovery is. It's, and again, it's not the like, I become his mother. It's more this like, when heartache, difficulty, emotion, anger, conflict arises, who do I become? And for an enmeshed person, who they become is a version of their dutiful, allied, caretaking little boy or little girl, who responds or approaches things in the way that works best for the enmeshing parent. So the focus of enmeshment recovery is, again, it's not on like breaking up or grow up. It's looking at this part of you that is underdeveloped, is scared, is small, is afraid, can't use adult skills. This actually makes me think of my 2-year-old when you talk about enmeshment and entitlement. His thing right now is like if someone's eating, he needs to be on their lap, eating their food, like taking it over. So I really don't want that to be the expectation. So like I tell him every time he wants to climb in my lap, like you can sit on my lap, but you can't play with my food. You can sit on my lap and eat your food, but you can't sit on my lap and eat my food. And we get there in the first place because he has no compunction at any time of day. If he wants to be in a lap, like he just comes and finds a lap. And that's developmentally appropriate. He's not a sociopath. There's not something wrong with him. Like he's little and he has to go about every means he has to like, I need to get the attention that I need and I need to get my needs met. As we grow up, as we become more mature, and I can see this in just my 3-year-old, just 15 months older than my youngest son, she's developing some ability. It's not super strong, but she's developing some ability to say like, okay, I can wait, and then she
Right.
does.
Mm-hmm.
Or the other night, they were wanting to watch a TV show, and they argue over what TV show they're going to watch, which is so fun. But she they start one show and then they decide. I thought they were deciding to watch another show, and so I turn off the one show that they were watching, and my daughter gets upset, and I say, well, your brother wants to watch something different. And she said, but I love that show so much. Like, again, it wasn't this like automatic meltdown. Like, she could start to talk about, like, this is why it's important to me. So when there's not a trauma or an abuse that stunts our development, we go through these phases. Like, my little boy doesn't think twice about going for what he wants. My 3-year-old can think a little more about it, not because I hope she doesn't feel bad about it, but more like there's other people involved here. And then my older boys are, of course, much more sophisticated in that. So I hear in this like the track marks of enmeshment are turning into a kid when there's conflict. Let me say that a better way. The toolbox I have is a kid's toolbox. I can get angry. I can get entitled. I can look at you and say, why would you even have boundaries with me? I have a need here, which is immature. It's young. And I'm not saying that pejoratively. That's not a criticism. It's a description of that is the best I can do in these situations as long as that abuse still lives in me unchecked. When I do sort out what it was like to live with an alcoholic mother in this instance here, when I do sort out how I feel when my needs aren't met or I don't feel like they're being responded to, that's what makes who I am, the experiences I've had and how do I feel. So I would say it's less about enmeshed people are entitled as I would say enmeshed people are developmentally immature. They're coming at these adult problems from a non-adult set point because they weren't allowed to grow into adults. In fact, it was strongly discouraged, to put it kindly. If that makes sense.
It does. That was really helpful. Okay. While my spouse is in recovery for sex addiction, and while we have been something deeply supportive of that and getting my own treatment, I'm beginning to struggle deeply with the narrative that the sexual abuse my spouse has inflicted on me is a symptom of their sexual addiction. I am actually a subject matter expert in sexual violence, and this idea is antithetical to everything we know about sexual abuse, and it is not a survivor-centric, trauma-informed way of dealing with these issues. How can I make peace with this narrative, or should I be challenging those in recovery community, be the professionals, betrayed partners, addicts, or books, podcasts, etc., when they embrace this idea?
The short answer to that last part is yes, do. I mean, this is an evolving field. It's super, super complex. I would say to that, like, also keep in mind that a narrative that focuses on a partner's trauma is not the narrative that the addict needs in order to heal any more than the narrative that focuses on the addict's experience is what the partner needs to heal. So it's a lot of moving pieces here that have to be put in play at the right time. And I don't know what the right time is. Anyone who says they know what the right time is, I think they're trying to sell you something. It's less about like, here's how it's supposed to go, and more about as these issues come up, can we pivot? We pivot to the narrative that helps hold the issue. So I don't think for a lot of people in sex addiction recovery, I don't think it works for them to start with, you're actually a sexual abuser. You don't have a problem with addiction. You're an abuser and you've got to work on that. That's not to say that people who are addicted to sex don't abuse sexually. So it depends, I would say, the introduction of the narrative and what we focus on depends on what stage we are in healing. And what I make up from what you're talking about here is we've been doing the sex addiction healing thing, and there's this part of me that is unanswered, it's unsupported, and I even feel like we're headed in the wrong direction from that. So not only speaking up in a recovery community to professionals, educating them. I just at this last CSAT symposium, I went to a breakout session about domestic violence, which was so helpful in understanding. Um, that's not when I was getting CSAT trained over 13 years ago. That's not something that we talked about because we were avoiding. It's just like that part of the field hadn't developed. The connection between addiction and domestic violence had um, not developed to that point. So yeah, I would say don't make peace with the narrative. Challenge, but understand as well that there is not a single narrative. I don't know. My belief is as limited human beings, I don't know that we could hold the complexity of a single narrative that just like brings everybody in. So it's more of a shifting. When it's time to shift, when we need attention here, can we reconfigure the narrative that allows us to come at this problem and also understand that when we shift to this narrative, there are other parts of our life and our relationship that aren't going to be held in that, but maybe they don't need to be. Maybe that's not what it's about. I hope that helps.
Yeah, I do too. And sometimes, yeah, like getting stuck on a point, like what do you need now in order to be able to move forward? And so I think find what the next right thing is for you. When you're talking about domestic violence, we see it on both sides. I mean, we've had guys that have come to treatment bruised up. They've been the recipient. It's not okay either way. And unfortunately, some of the guys will go, well, I deserved it because I'm the betrayer. No one deserves that. Hello, betrayed here. I'm suffering really bad from chronic post-traumatic stress disorder, also huge attachment trauma. I do try everything to help myself, but the partner does not know anything about trauma, also not really interested, maybe shame, but he does so many unthoughtful things that really trigger me. What can I do? I try to explain, but I'm repeating things. It doesn't click. I get upset sometimes hours or days. What can I do?
Yeah, I applaud you in taking that relational approach first. Let me see if I can help you understand what's going on in me. Can I tell you? Would you be interested in learning more? At the end of the day, functional boundaries are ones that are not. Um, they get us what we need, whether or not we get the cooperation from others. So the functional boundary is I would like it if you could help me reduce the symptomology of my triggers, if you could help me reduce the intensity by XYZ. If you're not able to, don't want to, not interested, hate the idea, whatever that is, I'm not giving up on that because that's something that I need. So I'll make sure that I'm branching out. I'll make sure that I have people that I can talk to who are helpful with that. I'm going to take seriously that these triggers and these issues are real for me, and I'm going to minimize my contact with them. That might mean some reorganization in our relationship. There may be things that are no longer great for me to do just diving in both feet. So I would keep that focus on they say like with golf or baseball, it's not about the contact, it's the follow through. Stay focused on that follow through. You got a really good idea, it sounds like here, from what you need. You're trying the relationship route. I want my partner to show up and help me. Your partner's not. Okay, so what does your follow through look like? Can you still get in touch with what you need? Can you still stay on a healing journey without setting it up so that your partner can become a block to that?
Next question. I'm currently writing my restitution letter, and in doing so, I'm reading my partner's impact letter. As I'm reflecting on her pain, I thought it might be good to revisit her impact letter in small bits regularly to help me stay empathetic with her struggle, but concerned about toxic shame taking over. She said, well, I live it all every day. She is bothered that I can push this stuff out of my mind. How can I do better at acknowledging her struggle with healing?
My first thought is, could you ditch the letter? Not because it's not important, but that's a point in time, an orientation point in time. Could you maybe be less dependent on the letter and more able to come to your partner face to face and be able to say, how are you doing today and how's this resting on you? I want to make sure that I don't lose track of that, because that letter being a point in time, fingers crossed for both of you. If healing goes well, in a few years, that impact letter is not going to be valid anymore for how she carries it, because how we carry is a day-to-day thing. And so I I would say here, the letter is a stand-in for the relationship, and it serves a purpose. But yeah, I think it would be a mistake to come back to that over and over so you can remember. You can remember by talking to your partner, and you can actually get a better idea of, like I said earlier in the lecture part, when you're feeling the feeling, you can feel, what kind of sadness is this? What kind of hurt is this? Um, you're only going to get one type of that from the impact letter because it's written from that perspective. You'll stay up to speed with her more. You'll keep her in your heart more. You'll be more empathetic if you can live, give yourself permission, get the ability to ask, you want to give me an update? I've been wondering. I want to make sure I'm understanding.
Okay, the next question. We had D-Day 13 years ago. Then my husband was sober, not acting out. So that's more like abstinence. He did some therapy. It turns out he was actually in active relapse for the past 3 years. Our new D-Day was late May of, I assume, this year. Like the first time, the sexual acting out started instantly, and I've never witnessed him white knuckle. He says he's never white knuckled. Is this actually sex addiction? If it is, how do I ensure he doesn't tear my life apart again? And what makes it worth staying in a relationship with someone who repeatedly dehumanizes me, treats me with total lack of care and respect, and supposedly has a chronic illness where a relapse can happen anytime? Lots of pain in that one.
Yeah,
I'm
tons of pain.
sorry.
And
Yeah.
I'll respond to the end of that. I would say there's got to be something pretty darn special about what this person brings into your life and what this relationship gives you to weather all of that and to keep going in the relationship. And I don't say that facetiously, like really, relationships and do we keep going, they really depend on how special do we think this is, and how the special good parts, how worth it are they in preserving. So I was thinking about this the other day. A couple months ago, our golden doodle ate a towel,
Oh,
and I don't know why, because it doesn't make any sense.
because
But
it's a golden doodle and it's going to do what it's going
right,
to do. So there's,
right. He ate a towel. We became aware, and I'll totally own this is a bad way to think. But my first thought was like, well, it's been a good run, buddy. We've loved having you part of our family. And then like he's sick and he's not eating, and he's so sweet. He's a really, really sweet dog. And he's doing his like I want cuddles thing, and I just watch him walk, and he's like so goofy, and I just love it. And it didn't take long where I was reminded, and I thought, it doesn't matter what it costs. Like, we're gonna get you okay. Because there's something special here that I don't think we could go get another dog that would replace that. So my thought there is, when you talk about being dehumanized, treated with low total lack of care and respect, there must be something, or there would have to be something very, very special, really, really valuable for you to be holding on to weather that. The chronic addiction where relapse can happen anytime is not an excuse. It's a descriptor. Not an excuse. If I had a disease where a limb could explode